Hello, how are you? So, let's talk about the super boring subject of Social Security. So, Social Security has been around for over 100 years at this point. Well, not quite 100 years, sorry. And it has and was developed as a progressive idea basically around some kind of a basic subsistence benefit to people of retired age or the elderly. And it was then later expanded to also include people who had disabilities and who were unable to work, but needed some kind of, funds to survive on, or to at least to be helpful for other things. So Social Security is a paid for benefit. You pay into it. Everybody pays into it. And there is an income cap of the tax, the Social Security tax, which is what you pay in. It's part of the FICA taxes that come out of your check. Up to $150,000, maybe a smidge more, there's a cap. So if you make above $150,000, Social Security stops being taken out at the income above that level. So if you make $300,000, only Social Security is taken out from the 150 below, not the 150 above, to max out the 300,000. If we remove that cap, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but if we remove that cap, that means a lot more money from people who make a lot more gets to put into the pocket, into the pie, and that makes the whole system solvent. So there are a few things that are on this. No. Thank you. So, don't know what she was barking at. So, the importance of Social Security, it's not to replace retirement. It was never to replace retirement. At the time that it was implemented, which was just as we were coming out of the Great Depression, it was meant to ensure that people who had worked hard all of their years, mostly farmers and small independent business owners, had something else besides whatever savings they could have to support themselves on. And they paid into it. Now, Social Security often combined with a retirement, and that allowed people to have an extremely comfortable living as they were retiring in the 50s and 60s. And they put it at a common age for retirement, which was your late 60s. Back in the day, most people didn't survive very long out of their 60s. They didn't survive very long into their 70s or 80s. There was a number of folks who expired, basically, before they got into their 70s. Us living consistently into our 80s is a higher number these days and has been for a very long time. A big part of this has been vaccines, has been the advancements in health, has been antibiotics, has been advancements in antiseptic care throughout operations. Lots of things feed into that. So now that Social Security gets paid out over a longer period of time, which means the pot needs to be a little bit bigger. And it is not meant to be a cumbersome tax, to be honest, to be fair. It is self-perpetuating. So as people feed into it, it's put into a trust that earns about 4% interest, so that it helps that grow as well. One, I think it needs to be moved into a higher interest-bearing trust, period. Two, that trust generally purchases U.S. Treasury bonds. And those bonds are what create that 4%, because that's about average of what bonds, U.S. bonds, do. I think there's a minimum there that may be factored in for the Social Security program, but it is not hard. It is not a Ponzi scheme, because a Ponzi scheme is only one to maybe the early people getting into a scheme get to benefit the most, while everybody else further down loses it. Okay? Elon Musk may not pay much into Social Security, if anything at all, because of how his income actually happens and whatnot. It's not like he's necessarily getting a W-2. He may exclusively be paid through shares of a company. So I'm not sure how taxes actually as an individual work out for him in that regard, but the very, very wealthiest of people don't give a fuck about Social Security because they don't fucking need it. Social Security is for people who are without the ability to as easily invest and gain a retirement, but it was never meant to be a sole retirement. It was meant to be part of an overall retirement outlook. That's also the problem. But if we remove the income cap on Social Security, it immediately puts a whole bunch of money into that pie. It is not supposed to be borrowed against, but it has been borrowed against. And there's huge arguments around doing that. They're like, well, if we borrow it, we'll just put it back in. It is mandatory spending to pay it back, which means Congress can't negotiate or debate or dicker about it. They have to give it back. But it is because they looked at it as a pot of money that they could, maybe do some things with. And that's not what it's for. It is mandated to be paid back to the people because it does not belong to the government. It belongs to the people, and the government is being trusted with ensuring that it's collected appropriately, that it's dispersed appropriately, that everything with it is going on right. Here's a few things that are a lie, that it has a lot of fraud or waste in it. It actually doesn't. It is, I've seen numbers between 98 and 99.8%, incredibly well managed. Like only 1% is there fraud in it. There is no waste and there's no abuse of it because it's been set up to be highly protected because people fucking rely on it, right? So it's been taken seriously from the get-go. And a lot of laws that are under there are actually really new laws, or really old laws, I should say. So no one born 150 years ago is receiving benefits. The system has kept records. And if a child was born, say in the 1950s, but died when they are 10, they were issued a Social Security number, and the Social Security Administration retains that information as a Social Security number holder. So it has a record of that, which again, it could maybe even say it's a beneficiary because we're all who pay into the system beneficiaries of Social Security. For the most part, if you're given a Social Security number, you are a beneficiary of the Social Security accounts. And you pay into it to get money out of it. So if the other way that it's set up is that it pays out a month later than really it should. So it's paying for the previous month. So if you get a check on the 1st of September, it's paying for August, the month of August. So if somebody dies within a few days of that payment being paid, Social Security does get notified because most people, in fact, 99% of people go through some kind of mortuary or funeral home for services for the people who have died. And then they get reported to the Social Security Administration. Because one of the newer laws is, by law, you have to deal with a funeral home. And by law, the funeral home has to report you as deceased to the Social Security Administration. So reporting is not relying on individuals, it's relying on professionals to do it at a very high level, and if they don't, they get in trouble. So that happens, and yes, there are people who fall through the cracks, and these people get caught pretty quickly. Sometimes it might be a few years that they're receiving that check, and sometimes it's just not. Most of the time, that's because the death has not actually been reported, and something nefarious has gone on. But that is like less than 1% happening. Okay. So, the last person to receive like a Civil War pension was a veteran's disabled daughter who died less than 5 years ago in 2020, right? So most adults who die leave behind children and widows, and these people continue to receive benefits. So the benefits therefore will last a record longer than the life of the person who originally retained those benefits. That's what the whole Civil War, pension thing was about, is that just like with Social Security, the Civil War pensioners could give that to people, could give the benefit to others if they qualified to receive the benefit. And so that, pretty nifty that it was the Civil War pension benefit. But that was because of how those benefits were able to move to that other person. So if you die and you're able to receive that benefit, like if you are a dependent of that person who has died, you can still receive those benefits, and those benefits are still on the books, which may make that number look far older or longer than what makes sense. I mean, the Civil War was a long motherfucking time ago. So we're talking, 140 years ago, the Civil War? And the last person to receive a Civil War pension, veterans pension, died 5 years ago? That actually blows my mind. But that also means she was very young when she married the person who was receiving the pension. And actually was the daughter of that. I think the situation was that veteran married a woman when he was very old, got her pregnant, and then that kid, lived. So that person could have been born in the 1920s and, lived 100 years. But that is, again, emblematic of the way our lives are able to last longer. That pension lasts longer. And that is something to be of note. We have people who pay into the system and never withdraw from it because they pass. And then once their spouses are able to draw on those benefits, if they never remarry, they have to choose between their own benefits if they were working, or their spouse's benefits if those benefits, as a widow's benefits, are maybe a better number. But they don't get to draw both. That's also a way to protect the funds. There are so many different ways to protect it, and dealing with the Social Security Administration is not supposed to be a pain in the ass. It is supposed to be easy peasy. All three of my kids were born on a military base in a military base hospital. And I had someone come in with the paperwork, which I think is funny. You should not necessarily name your child immediately after having them, because sometimes you make it a funny name. My middle one kind of loves and hates his name. But you also request at that time for the birth certificate and request a Social Security card. And I got each one of my kids' Social Security cards a week or two later, probably a couple weeks later, from the Social Security Administration. So it is something that is protected in our system. It is a very popular program because I cannot tell you how many conversations in the insurance world that I have when someone pops out and has a conversation with me and it's like, yeah, we are on a, fixed income because they only receive Social Security, and maybe if they're military, also military retirement. Social Security doesn't get affected by your military retirement. It's one of the few things of income that doesn't affect it. But that means they have a fixed income. When I was doing Lyft and Uber years ago, there were many people that I picked up from their apartments or from where they were living at. And sometimes what they were living in was like a fucking shoebox. It's like basically the size of this room, maybe a little bit bigger, that had a bathroom, a small place to sit, and a place to stick a bed, and that was it. And they had to pay out of $700 a month or $600 a month for that place and for food, because they were caught in a stuck place where pensions stopped being given for working with a company for a long period of time. And Social Security is affected by whether or not you make an income. And people get hit on hard times, and the system that's supposed to help them is so antagonistic to offering that help that they feel better just not asking for help and trying to do things in a different way. That they have to figure out how to live a shit life only on $600 or so dollars to $800 a month. That amount goes up every year based on COLA, standard of living going up. So the cost of living. Social Security is a program that has some issues, we all know and understand, that should be fixed. But it is essentially a type of universal income. But instead of being offered by the government out of overall taxes, it's directly paid for by people. And with the way my taxes have worked, I haven't necessarily had to pay those taxes because my overall income has been so little once it's been adjusted in my business world. So I haven't necessarily paid every year into Social Security because I haven't hit the point where I have to pay into it. And as a sole 1099 person, there is a place where it just isn't, you have to make over a certain amount to pay into it, to be forced to pay into it. I could pay into it, I just haven't paid into it. That is affecting my overall Social Security benefits. And depending on how the next several years go, that either won't be a problem at all, or it might be a major fucking problem for me. I don't know. What I do know is that the system is very, very well done, because it has to be, because so many people rely on it. And when the government talks about being shut down, it doesn't talk about shutting off Social Security. It talks about furloughing the people who run Social Security so that they aren't there to do in the system what it needs to be done in order for those checks to go out. That's how that works. They don't stop Social Security because it should never stop. It stops the people from dealing with Social Security, even though that should be priority to stay open. I think if a Congress cannot get their shit together and work together, and the government gets shut down, then they don't get paid, and they don't get back pay for that. That we need to work that into the thing going, if you guys cannot have a conversation and come to a quality decision, and you want to shut down the government because you can't do a fucking budget, and you yell at us about fiscal responsibility, then you don't get paid for the amount of time that you force the whole government to shut down, because it affects the nation, your inability to do your job that you've been trusted with, your inability to do the job that you say, please trust me to do this, and we now can't trust you to do it because you can't get your shit together. I think that's much better. This is a program because it supports the poor and it supports lower income, and a lot of people have it in their queue as something to rely on. That it is somehow an easy target to remove. The thing is that my taxes do not pay your Social Security. My taxes, in general, your taxes, you pay on your own Social Security. You pay into your own Social Security. You pay into the bucket. And then, if you become a wealthier person, you are able to pay much more into that bucket, with the understanding that for the good of the whole community, and that should you ever lose your major income, you still have it but you can also help others to have it. I think that is I think that's an incredibly considerate, compassionate, and empathetic, not a compromise, but expectation to have of people who reside in our country and get wealthy, is that they're happy to be able to pay that amount in as they get wealthier, because ultimately they are in a better position for the most part, and hopefully for the rest of their lives, than a lot of other people may be able to be. And that there is no problems giving a little bit of help to that, because one incredibly wealthy person being able to put in greater income and greater amounts, if the income cap is taken off in Social Security, can help hundreds of other people have a few more dollars a month. And if multiple wealthy people do that, it helps other people have a few more dollars a month. And it also allows for disabled children and people who become disabled to be able to have those dollars for longer if necessary. And for the older people who are going to be living longer to have a quality life as they get into retirement. That is not an unreasonable expectation at all. If you want to talk more about it, great. Put it down in the comments. Yeah. Think about it. Learn more about what Social Security actually is. The rich can get it, but their amount goes down depending on how high any other income that they have that is not necessarily a postal income or other retirement dollars. Depending on how that is, their Social Security income goes down and zeroes out if their other income rises above a certain amount, which is fair, because then they don't really need it. It's there and available should they lose that income and wind up needing it, but ultimately they don't. Think about it. Learn more about what Social Security is, and don't listen to the idiots on fucking Fox, because they're not giving you the right information. They're wanting you to think that it's not good for you so that they can take it and privatize it. And right now, Social Security steadily increases. It has a 2.2 or 2.7 trillion dollars right now, so it's able to last for the next decade. But it is something that belongs to all of us, and Elon Musk has no fucking business touching it or messing with it. Nobody in the government has a right to touch it or mess with it. And to privatize it means it loses stability and has the possibility of losing value below what the investment would be if it's privatized into the stock market. That means it is at risk to zero fucking out if the stock market crashes, then Social Security crashes. That is an unacceptable alternative. And that is what they want, but they want to convince you that that is the right thing to do. It is not. If you do not know how to function in the stock market and you barely understand how it works, why the fuck would you want your Social Security funds reliant on the stock market? The stock market can indeed gain 11% compared to the 4%, but it can also lose, like it did in 2020, like it did in 1920. It can lose everything in a retirement fund. People's retirement funds went from 400,000 to less than 40,000, or were completely wiped out, depending on what it was configured. And if they held those numbers, it might have recovered. But if you're nearing retirement, or you're within 5 years or 10 years of retirement, it can't recover quick enough for you to need it. That's the part they're not telling you. The what if scenario of what if things crash? What if things go awry? What if we have a number of down years and it goes below that 4%? What if that? I need this in 3 years. I need this now. I'm at the Social Security Administration trying to get this set up right now. I'm going to need it in 15 years. If we go into a 10-year depression, there's not going to be a bounce back in the markets quick enough for people who need it in 10 years, much less 15 years, where it may go back up, but because you're starting to pull from it, it may not go back up quick enough than the period of time you need to draw from it. Private, in this case, I used to be of the other opinion until I got into the stock market and understood these things. That is not a safe place for Social Security, period. Again, please educate yourself. It is vastly important that you understand what this is. And let me look here. I'm trying to see of a good place to send you to. Robert Reich is a good person who talks about Social Security. There's a place called Social Security Works. Go look them up. Okay? If you sign up for anything, they're just send you an email. They're going to ask for money. It's to keep them going. But really, Social Security Works is co-founded by people who have worked in the Social Security Administration for decades. They know what it's about. They know why it's there. They know how to make it better. They know how, they know how it could be improved. They know why it's really detrimental to remove it. Just so you have a place to go. That's Social Security Works. Okay? So take a look. Tell me what you think. And yeah, we'll see you in the streets.